This morning, I know there's a lot of competing events this weekend on top of being a holiday weekend, so we appreciate you coming out for this, the 4th annual Timothy Ray Brown Community Cure Symposium. So I think most everybody here knows who Timothy was, probably knew him personally, since he and his partner Tim were very active in the community here before he unfortunately passed away from cancer, not HIV, 4 years ago now. So this is done in his honor. He's the reason we're here. His cure is what spurred the whole cure research movement. So we owe him a huge gratitude for coming out as somebody being cured and during the spotlight. It wasn't easy. There were a lot of challenges, but he soldiered through, and it served as a real example for people like Paul and others who come after him. So I just want to acknowledge him for that. Also, while we're on acknowledgements, we'll do a brief land acknowledgement, acknowledging that we are meeting today on the ancestral lands of the Cahuilla tribe, the Agua Caliente tribe, rather, Cahuilla Indians here in Palm Springs, and we honor their stewardship of the lands ongoing for both the ancestors, the indigenous peoples stewarding the lands today and future generations. So thank you very much. And then some housekeeping stuff. So restrooms, right and left, boys that way, ladies, all gender that way. And when we have Q&A at the end, please wait for someone. There'll be a volunteer who will bring one of the microphones to you. This is being recorded. You can see we've got a camera here. So if you don't want to be on camera, don't jump up in front of one. Basically, but the cameras will be facing the front, so towards the speakers, but the voices will be on the recording, and for that reason, please do wait for a microphone to come to you so we can get everything captured for the recording that will be posted and archived on our YouTube channel. So, and exits. So you can see lots of doors, you have lots of options. If the big one hits while we're talking, just run for the hills. So on that cheery note, we'll go ahead and get started. So I'd like to introduce today our panel of Cure Research folks. So starting out with Paul Edmonds, the so-called City of Hope patient. You'll hear in just a minute about his story. His clinician, Dr. Gianna Dichter from City of Hope. Professor Lars Posch from the Sanford Vernon Previs Institute and also Scripps, and is with RID HIV. And Dr. Paula Cannon, professor from USC, also with one of the primary investigators for the RID Collaboratory. So thank you all for coming out today. And so we had a great holiday traffic to get out, so we appreciate the sacrifice. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to Paul and Paul and Janice, so go ahead.
Okay. Hello. So before you became the City of Hope patient, you had HIV for 30 years, including a diagnosis of AIDS. Can you tell me what that was like?
Living with HIV for the first decade was incredibly challenging. In the early years, the stigma was heavy and constant. The medications available back then were harsh, difficult, as putting it mildly. Managing side effects became a daily part of life. I lost many friends and acquaintances along the way, which was emotionally devastating from constant monitoring. Before I could even begin the transplant process, I went through many rounds of chemotherapy over 3 months to get the leukemia in remission. Once that happened, I was eligible for the transplant. Then came the conditioning chemotherapy, which completely wiped out my immune system to make room for the donor cells. That was, without question, the most difficult part, physically and emotionally. After the transplant, I did experience graft versus host disease, but thankfully my case was relatively mild compared to what many patients go through. Even so, the risks are always present when a bone marrow transplant. With a bone marrow transplant, your own cells can fight the donor cells, or the donor cells can attack your body. It's a delicate balance. Overall, it was a long and often grueling journey, but I'm profoundly grateful to have come through it. next steps in researching HIV cure for people who undergo bone marrow transplants?
Yeah, so bone marrow transplants have to date cured about 10 people with HIV. Of course, there's the original Berlin patient, the Timothy Ray Brown patient, and then, of course, the London patient, and then Paul, the City of Hope patient. These transplants basically replace a person's immune system. So it's not for everyone. It's really reserved for people who have blood cancer, like either leukemia or lymphoma, and need to undergo a bone marrow transplant for their underlying blood cancer, which, and what happens is that the cells that these patients or people receive from their donors effectively can eliminate HIV, either because the donor carries a gene that carries basically a resistance to contracting HIV, but the actual chemotherapy and the graft itself can also help eliminate HIV as well.
What is a bone marrow transplant?
So a bone marrow transplant, as you described, is it's a major procedure, and in the case of allogeneic transplants, or people who have donors from other people, they basically take the cells from the bone marrow, which includes your red blood cells and your immune cells, and effectively give the recipient medicine, like medication, very intensive medication, chemotherapy, radiation therapy, to wipe out all their bone marrow cells and then replace it with the donor cells. And so what happens is that that person who has a transplant gets an entire new immune system, which replaces the old immune system. And if that new immune system is able to eliminate HIV, either because of the mutation or because of the chemotherapy or because of the transplant itself, there's something called a graft versus host effect and graft versus leukemia effect. There's also likely an graft versus HIV effect. And that is what we hope to study actually with our upcoming trial that Paul is engaging in, and I am as well. It's called the SHIELD study, and what it is it's some scientists at Cornell and Oregon Health Sciences University are studying all the people who have undergone bone marrow transplants who had HIV. So the successful ones, and including actually Timothy Ray Brown, some of his, they have some of his tissue that's stored. And also Paul's is involved along with all the others and people who were unsuccessfully cured, because there's some people, there's the 2 Boston patients, and there's also this Mayo Clinic patient who were unsuccessfully cured after a bone marrow transplant. So we are studying them as well, along with their donors, to try to figure out what part of the immune system helped eliminate HIV.
Why does a genetic mutation called the CCR5 delta 32 matter in some of these cases?
Yeah, so in 8 of the 10 people who have been cured of HIV, the donors carry this gene, which basically is, so HIV needs to enter the CD4 cell or the T cell. It needs kind of this door handle to enter. It's called a receptor, but basically, in order for the virus to enter the cell, it needs to attach to this door handle onto the cell. And what happened is with the 8 out of 10 who had that homozygous CCR5 delta 32 mutation, or it's an HIV kind of a resistance mutation, that gene eliminates that CCR5 from the cell. So HIV can no longer attach to the cell and enter the cell and continue to thrive in the body. There are 2 people who were successfully transplanted, did not have donors who carried that rare special mutation, and that is what researchers are very excited about, because the question is what other aspects of the transplant really effectively helped cure them, specifically what part of the immune system, and is it the graft versus host, graft versus leukemia, but also, again, a question about a graft versus HIV effect as well.
How can the transplant cure HIV if the donor doesn't have that mutation?
Yeah, so that's what we're trying to learn. HIV hides in certain parts of the body. It's called these reservoirs, and there's these kind of like locations that it can hide out, and it can reactivate when people are off antiretroviral therapy. And so something about these transplants, whether it's the chemotherapy or whether it's the treatment, the conditioning therapy that people get during the transplant, or alternatively the immune system that has some special reaction that is able to eliminate the HIV, and that's what we're trying to learn about.
What does this teach scientists about future HIV treatments?
Yeah, so I mean, I think my colleagues here will be able to talk a little bit more about that. I think there's definitely plans to hopefully transplant more people who need it. Of course, only those who have a blood cancer that would benefit from a bone marrow transplant. But as the HIV population is aging, leukemia and lymphoma are diseases of aging, and so we do expect to see more people with HIV who would benefit from having a bone marrow transplant, and there will be opportunities in that regard to help certain people, we hope.
Very good.
So a quick question for you, Dr. Dichter. If somebody in this room or people they know who have HIV and are diagnosed with lymphoma or leukemia, and they're interested in finding out if they would be a candidate for the procedure, whom should they call, what should they do?
So we have, City of Hope's, of course, a bone marrow cancer transplant center, and so the hematology department over there are the ones who do the actual transplant. I'm not a hematologist, but they would contact me, and then we could talk about it. Ultimately, what happens also is the donors that are selected. You know, one of the things that we were talking about is that donor transplantations in general have become a lot safer over the years. And, you know, historically, we always were looking for that homozygous CCR5 delta 32 mutation, that special mutation, but you also had to have a perfect match, which is a rare situation. Most people don't match. It's more common in people who are related and things like that, and in fact your donor was a perfect match. But now the hope is that we can do more transplants because they are showing to be just as safe with a mismatch, but from a donor who does carry that rare genetic mutation, and potentially offer it as a cure as an option.
And then I know there's a New York patient, who's a woman in New York who couldn't find an exact match, and they used cord blood. Can you talk a little bit more about how that works and how that might help people who might not be able to find their matches?
Yeah, so I mean that was an experimental procedure because they effectively used cells from two different donors to help cure that patient, and so that is definitely something that's not done on a regular basis. I think that though even that was several years ago, and again the conditioning regimen or the treatment that people get in preparation for transplant has become incredibly safer in terms of helping people get transplanted who don't have an exact match. And I think that that's more of the future than perhaps like what they described with the New York patient.
Great, good to know. Thank you. So why don't we move on? You kind of set the stage. Oh, is there a question in the back? Yeah, go ahead. A few short questions. More time at the end for more questions.
Thank you. Thank you. I read something about a reference between one marker of the gene mutation versus two markers, one marker being like my father, and two markers being both my parents. Does that make a difference on CCR5?
Yeah, so when we say homozygous CCR5 delta 32, it means that both genes have that mutation. But people who carry one of those genes and not both of those genes tend to have like some of their cells do not, you know, the HIV cannot enter into the cell, but it's not 100%.
Great, thank you.
Yes, about the CCR5 delta 32 gene in your discussion there. when that first came out, I was following that closely, and it's more than theory, they did not much evidence on it, but they were saying that the people that, fairly rare at the time, I don't know what the status is now, these years later, but they found out that a lot of people that had that gene, rare gene, Delta 32 mutation, if their ancestry lineage, they survived the Black Plague that wiped out much of Eastern Europe, especially the British Isles, Scotland, and Ireland, where my ancestors came from. And I have a friend here, Paul Strange, who's retired. He's never got HIV. He has all the sex he wanted to have. And he's got the Delta gene 32 rare thing. But I was wondering how rare is that? Do they have more knowledge of it? Or can you see the only entity that's out there doing research on that, trying to find some way to find out who has it and who doesn't? Is there other research entities out there that are looking into Delta 32 mutation?
So it is a rare mutation, and it only exists in about 1% of the population, and most of the people who have it are from Northern Europe, kind of that region of the world. And there are, definitely infections that are associated with, which may have a protective effect, but that being said, also potentially risk. There's some data I had told Paul about. There's a higher risk of complications associated with like some of the arbovirus infections, specifically West Nile. So it's, I think, kind of things that we're still like learning about, but absolutely, I think there's definitely, we're not specifically researching that at my institution, but yeah, I think it's a big question as to what that does, what protection that does provide, and of course risk as well.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Dicker, what do you know about taking the placenta from a stem cell from a newborn placenta as opposed to an adult?
Oh, from like cord blood? Is that what you're saying?
Newborn placenta.
Yeah, so that's what they did with the New York patient. That was the cord blood that had that homozygous CCR5 Delta 32 mutation, and that's what they used to cure her. Again, cord blood transplants tend to be higher risk, and so it's not something that's done as routinely as it used to be.
Other questions? Oh, Steve, go ahead. You have a question?
There's a recent patient up in Northern California. I just wanted that was a somewhat different situation as well. Can you explain what, is it Lorraine?
Oh, you're talking about Lorraine Willenberg, the San Francisco
What
patient.
was her
the
situation?
Esperanza patient.
Because it wasn't the same as the others, right?
Right. So she was someone who cured HIV naturally without having any bone marrow. She was what they call an elite controller, was always able to suppress HIV on her with her own immune system for whatever reason. And at first she had HIV in her system, they could detect it, and as time went on, that was eliminated, that she literally had no HIV in her body. And then more recently, unfortunately, she was diagnosed with cancer and has had to go on this immunosuppressive treatment, which has suppressed her immune system. And the HIV did not come back. And the researchers think that that's proving, that's positive proof that it's really been eliminated, because otherwise it would have come back, given the cancer treatment she's been on. So that's just really helpful. And there's another patient in Argentina, another woman, this seems to be a woman thing so far, called the Esperanza patient, after the town she visited with Esperanza also means hope in Spanish. So they both give hope that there's other things to look at in finding a cure.
Good morning. Where does one go, or is it possible to get a test for that genetic mutation, or if you're not in a clinical trial, so you know that it's possible to search out a trial?
Yeah, so it is a blood test. It's not something that's done routinely on most people. It's done in the setting of when you're looking for a transplant recipient. But it is a simple blood test. I wouldn't know where, something that any physician should be able to order, but it's not done at all centers. So I don't know, I wouldn't know where you would go to get that test.
But practically, when people are trying to get people can join a registry, right? They can offer to be a bone marrow
Yes,
donor,
that's
right?
true. That is true. If you you join the registry, they do automatically test for the homozygous CCR5 delta 32. The registry, however, they tend to favor younger people. Just well, it's just it's more of a function of like the donors. They prefer younger donors because those donors are less likely to have a concern for developing leukemia down the line.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, thank you all for being here. I was just curious, since you mentioned blood donation, is it possible for someone living with HIV who's undetectable to be a blood marrow donor?
That's not, so no.
So kind of one recent development, it's not blood donation, but organ donation.
Organ donation, yes.
That has been approved, something called the HOPE Act.
That's correct.
People may remember the case of Nina Martinez, a young woman born with HIV, who's very healthy, who donated one of her kidneys for someone with HIV. And that's happening in centers around the country now. They've changed the law so that it can be clinical practice. Before it was just done as part of a research trial, and now it's available to anyone. So.
Really quick, in reference to getting a CCR5 test, it can be done. Quest does it. Quest Diagnostics. But if you Google it, you'll see other options that come up, and it can be done with a cheek swab.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is out there if anyone's interested if they have the mutation.
Also, if you've done 23andMe or any of the genetic testing, because they don't report your CCR5 gene status, but for those of you who've got more time, you can download your analysis from 23andMe and put it through other online engines, and it will give you your status. I'm heterozygous. Which is not surprising. And so is my father. Yeah, I even I even analysed both of my parents. So,
I have a question,
Yeah, quickly, Mike.
kind of in regard to the CCR5. In regard to the CCR5 test, I took a tropism test and I'm able to take cells entries. Is that totally related or unrelated, those tests?
The Trofile?
Like the tropit, yeah.
Yeah,
and,
the Trofile test. Yeah, so that does test if you're a candidate for it, but it's really more. It's a test of the virus itself because it tests what type of virus you have, whether the virus is. So there's different strains of HIV, and HIV, there's some most of them are CCR5 alone. Some actually attach to both the CCR5 and CXCR4 receptors, and then some attach to both. So when you do that test, it's checking to see if you have the CCR5 to check for specifically the marabavir as a treatment option for you for your HIV, for a person's HIV.
Any other questions for Paul and Dr. Dixon? If not, we'll move ahead to the research portion with Lars and Paula and kind of tell us where we are today and where we're going, and especially what the Red HIV Collaboratory is doing.
Shall I start?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, one of the key challenges of for an HIV cure is the persistent reservoir, meaning that HIV integrated in the cell is very good at hiding. And if you are on an ART treatment regimen, there's no detectable virus, yet the virus is still hiding in the cells. But the cells are indistinguishable from uninfected cells, so it is very difficult to target these cells and identify them. So the procedure that Paul underwent is obviously a very major procedure and not suitable for the general population, and there's a lot of research into what other procedures or approaches could be developed to eliminate this HIV reservoir, the infected cells. There's one a clinical trial also going on in Southern California that Dr. Dichter is also involved in, that is working on developing CAR T cells. So CAR stands for chimeric antigen receptor. Basically what it is it engineers or retrains the T cells in your body to specifically target and find HIV. HIV is very good at hiding, and your regular T cells may not be able to detect it. But what they're doing is they re-engineer them so that they can specifically find HIV and destroy it. So far, problems, I mean, these approaches have been done for a while, but so far these engineered cells didn't survive very long in the body. And so here they're using a novel technology that keeps these cells awake and alive, that essentially gives them something to do, even in the absence of HIV, that makes them stick around and stay there longer. So ideally, if you would get these CAR T cells and the virus would reactivate, the CAR T cells would be able to target and destroy the infected cells. So meaning that in the absence of our treatment, these cells could ideally suppress the virus.
And this approach is using your own cells, so that makes it a lot safer than having donor cells that you might possibly reject, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's still, you still have to go through preparative therapy that affects your immune system, that has inherent risks as well, but it's not as, if you don't have the graft versus host disease effects of an allogeneic transplant.
The CAR T cell study, how many patients have gone through this already, and how aggressive is it moving forward now?
So, I mean, the study is a phase 1 study, so this is right now they're testing mostly for safety and if these cells actually stick around. I mean, maybe you know more, so, I mean, it's in progress, right? There are no results reported. It's probably a smaller number of patients.
It's only a handful at this point, I think, that are, But I don't know if anyone's actually gone through the procedure yet. I don't believe so.
Sure.
I don't believe so.
It's really in preparation. It's very new and a very exciting development, but we don't know yet where that is.
Great.
How that will go.
Is there an estimate when you'll move to phase 2 and actually you'll have somebody go through it?
Ultimately.
I mean, do you have any estimation of when that will happen?
I don't.
A phase 1 would take a few years,
Yeah.
probably. I mean, just for a certain number of people, you need a certain number of
Right.
people to go through it, then for all the analysis to happen, and then before it moves to an actual phase 2, just preparing the phase 2 study will take some time. So I think this will be a number of years, probably, assuming that it will work. I mean, maybe early results for the phase 1 in a few years, probably, but it's these things take time. But I'm not involved in the study, so I can't tell you what it is. There are no publications yet on any
Thank you.
data.
Yeah, it's a first-in-human study, so they move very slowly, very cautiously. So they're just testing the procedure, as they said, to make sure it's safe and that it works. And they're not even adding the other parts that would actually make it work as a cure yet. So
And doses too.
Yeah.
So it's very, very early.
So other approaches beyond the CAR T cells. The CAR T cells, it's similar to in Paul's case, you're helping the immune system to fight the virus, is to directly attack the infected cells, to identify them and eventually destroy these cells. So one of the approaches that also our collaboratory is involved in is what is called kick and kill, or some call it shock and kill, or kick and eliminate. But the idea is to reawaken the virus in the cell, which sounds counterintuitive, but since you would be unarmed, the virus, even if reawakened, wouldn't be able to reinfect any cells. But by reawakening the virus in the cell, it becomes visible. So the cell then becomes visible to the immune system or to other treatments that could identify this infected cell and specifically target and destroy that cell. So that is a two-step process. First, to reactivate the virus in the cell. This is what calls the kick, to just shock the cell into producing it. And then the kill would be a second treatment that could be either your immune system or your immune system with some help or some other treatments, for example, the CAR T cells that then can identify these reactivated cells and destroy it. So that is something that we are currently actively working on in a number of cells. Kind of Kind of the opposite approach of that, it's called a block and lock. So that means the virus that is dormant in these cells, that you kind of try to push it even deeper into a sleeping state, into a dormancy, so that it could ideally never be reactivated. So in theory that is also quite exciting, but practically there are a number of problems. That means you need a treatment that essentially is durable for the rest of your life, that for the rest of your life keeps this virus in a dormant state. Whether it will be possible to do it for that long is questionable at this time, or we don't know, and it may lead to you having to take another medication for the rest of your life that suppresses the virus. At that point it would be not that different from art. So it is, I think, scientifically a very interesting process to also investigate what keeps the virus dormant. But again, we don't have a clear shot on the net here to get a therapy. There are other procedures to directly target the virus that are more experimental, which is, gene editing. And I don't know, Paula, would you like to talk about that, or should I say?
I'm going to be more big picture.
Keep going. But so you may have heard about CRISPR or gene editing. That there are new technologies. There was a Nobel Prize a number of years ago that you can go in with a certain treatment and change the genome. So what you could do with that is you could go in and try to cut out the virus that has integrated in the cells. You could cut it out or destroy it in the cells. Another option for these gene editing treatments would be to edit the cells, not the virus, but to edit the cells and remove the CCR5. So what Paul had by getting cells from another donor that has the delta CCR5 mutation, here you would go in and try to make this mutation directly in the cells. Again, this is scientifically a very exciting possibility, but right now we are not quite there yet, and the risk of adverse effects, the risk of side effects is high. These treatments are not safe yet. They are not practical to reach every cell in your body at this time. So that is something that Paula's group is working actively on how to deliver these treatments, how to set up these treatments. There's something for the future that people are actively working on, but again, it would take some time before this becomes relevant. Yes?
Under the current administration, has the research slowed down?
Yes.
How much?
Well, I can give you a personal example. I got a new grant to work on HIV Cure that should have started in January, and we finally got it after multiple delays and rounds in October. So great, we got it. We lost 10 months. But it's been hugely disruptive, and it's also sending a message to my graduate students and new people who want to come into science that this is not appreciated, that this is risky. So as well as all the, frankly, sacrifices that people in their mid-20s make to go to graduate school or basically take a very low-paid job for 5 years to become trained as scientists, they're now thinking, why did I do this? So, and then on top of that, you've probably heard that there's also been limitations on and blocks put in place for international students to come in. I was not born here, you might detect an accent. Being able to bring in and encourage the smartest people from all over the planet to come and work with us is really critical. And it's why American science works so well. And we've seen a huge decrease in the number of PhD students who are applying, especially from India and China. And again, it's just sending this very negative message. I'm hopeful, however. I kind of think anybody who works on HIV Cure Research is an optimist. So I'm hopeful that we've sort of bottomed out, and now we're all kind of starting to see an uptick again. I know I have. I've gone through my, grief denial, blah, 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 and now I'm just like, So I think things are kicking up again. I would also say is maybe not a completely negative thing about the current administration is that, there's a lot of negative things I could say about their approach to HIV and AIDS, but one glimmer of hope is they do seem to be quite positive about HIV cure research. And that's because they view, quite correctly, HIV infection as a chronic condition for which currently, you need to take drugs, which, as I'm trying to think how to say this politically carefully, there is a move to get people out of the system where they need to be taking drugs all the time. So there is interest in the idea of cures that could help people get to an ability to control or eliminate their HIV without taking drugs. So we'll cling on to that positive thing. But it's been horrible.
I think at the institutional level for NIH and especially the AIDS, the division at NIH, cure research is one of their highest priorities in terms of HIV. So they have funded our HIV program along with 10 others. It's part of the Martin Delaney collaboratories. It's their flagship program for HIV cure research, and they have really invested a lot of resources into this research. And I think also within the institute, the people working on this, collaborating with us, the program officers, program directors, I think are extremely supportive and interested in that. And I hope that once there's some stability after all these changes returning to the process, that I think this will continue to receive the support from the NIH group folks.
Other questions? Do you want to go ahead with your comments?
Yeah, maybe I'll just think, it was great listening to you three, so I just have some more sort of big picture thoughts thinking about this. One is, it really struck me how we keep learning new things. I've been talking about Timothy for a long time, and I used to have a very simple explanation. He had cancer. He got a treatment for his cancer, radiation, chemotherapy, with the goal of killing all the cancer cells. And as a byproduct, it probably killed most of the cells that also had HIV, as Lars was saying, these reservoir cells. And then he got a donor transplant to take place of his own immune system that was an innocent bystander of the cancer treatment. And because the donor treatment was from a CCR5 negative donor, the new immune system that filled his body was also resistant to HIV. And I was like, well, that makes complete sense. That's actually quite easy to understand and quite easy to explain. But now we're learning new things, which is good. We have these people who got a bone marrow transplant who've also been cured, and their donor didn't have this CCR5 negative HIV resistance gene. So as John was saying, we're kind of having to rethink, what's the recipe for success? What new things are we learning about the immune system that we can maybe harness to come up with new ways to fight HIV? And the other thing that I've learned, is how complicated and multi-component the immune system is. When I started learning about the immune system, I was like, okay, so there are antibodies, right? And then there are like little soluble things that stick to the virus and stop it, working. And then there are T cells, which go and eat bad cells. They eat cancer cells and they eat HIV infected cells, and that's kind of all I knew. But oh boy, now we have a whole alphabet soup of different parts of the immune system that are all involved to a different extent in different diseases and conditions. And one of the things that RID HIV, which is the big grant that Lars and I are part of, one of the things we do is we are trying to take a holistic view to looking at the interaction between the immune system and HIV. We're looking at people who are naturally able to sort of suppress their virus, who have lower levels of reservoir, and we're saying, okay, so what's different about their immune system than somebody where the levels of the reservoir is higher? Can we figure out the differences? And can we harness those? Can we turn those into drugs or interventions or gene therapies to exploit that? And we're learning some cool things. We're also learning, and you guys probably know this, how critically important and maybe even should be considered a part of our immune system, our microbiome is. You know, all those bacteria in our body that are in our brain, they're everywhere, that really, they're like a separate organ that we've sort of ignored before. And we're looking at how those are different between people who have these different characteristics. And we're thinking, are there things that our microbiome does that we could simulate in people, either with drugs or maybe with something as simple as diet? So I'm really excited about this sort of holistic approach to thinking about just taking somebody's immune system writ large and helping to sort of push it into a form where it's better able to control HIV. And of course, HIV learns so much from, I'm going to say, sister conditions, where we're also trying to harvest the immune system. Biggest one, of course, is cancer. You know, all the really exciting new treatments for cancer. You've heard about CAR T cells. That's taking our immune system and making it better, you know? Because if you think about it, if you've got cancer, okay, lots of things have gone wrong, but the big thing that's gone wrong is your immune system fell asleep. Your immune system didn't notice a cancer and didn't wipe it out. So what CAR T cells do is you take T cells out of a person and you engineer them to actually see that cancer. It's like you say to the T cells, oi, there's a cancer, go after it. And then you put them back in, and CAR T cells are extraordinary for treating blood cancers. It's really changed how we cure many cancers. So as Lars said, we're now thinking about how do we make CAR T cells that work better for HIV. So that's just one little example. The last example I'll give you is what I do. I work on B cells, which are another part of the immune system. B cells, I wish they were called A cells. B cells make antibodies.
B means better.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Right, B cells make antibodies. And as you probably know, when people have HIV or when people are vaccinated, they make antibodies. And those antibodies kind of recognize the HIV virus, but they don't cure you. Okay? So it's like we don't make antibodies that are good enough. And our B cells, they're trying their best, bless them. But the antibodies aren't good enough. So what I'm doing is I'm taking somebody's B cells and I'm saying, okay, you know, forget it. I'm going to show you the antibody you need to be making. You may have heard of broadly neutralizing antibodies. These are very rare antibodies we've pulled out of a handful of people that just are magic, and they're really powerful and they suppress the virus. And so we're saying, this is the antibody you should make. And we are engineering the B cells to make that antibody, and then the idea is we would put them back into people. And it's almost like we've done a run-around vaccination. Rather than vaccinating you and telling you to make the antibody, we are giving you the antibody you should make. So that's just another example of how the things we are learning about the immune system and we're learning from other diseases are, we can think of ways that we can apply this to the challenge of HIV. And well, scientifically it's a very exciting time to be working on this, but of course, you guys are the reason we're doing it. As always, people with HIV and your willingness to donate blood and tissues, your willingness to sign up for clinical trials, and your willingness to come and sit in an auditorium on what is otherwise a very beautiful day and show your interest and advocate for the funding to do this. This is really what lets us all do it. So you've been thanking us, but we want to thank you as well.
Thank you so much.
Just one quick point. Thank you so much for saying that, because I was going to say thank you again for everything you do. How can we as a community help move this stuff along? I know there's phase 1 studies, which are risky, but you guys need volunteers for that. But there's also phase 4 studies going on here in Palm Springs, and I'll make sure that everyone's aware of those so that, if we can help move this along, we need to do it.
Yeah, I can speak to the research happening here in Palm Springs. So we are recruiting for the study at the City of Hope. It's going through UC San Diego. In fact, at last year's program, the Timothy Ray Brown Cure Symposium, Angelo Cardoso from City of Hope did come and talked about it. And so if anyone's interested, let me know. I think it's going to be on our website again. I think they've got a lot of people that are going to have more, and those, they have on their roster would be, when they're ready for phase 2, could sign up for those. Also, the broadly neutralizing antibodies, that Paula was talking about, BNABs, are being studied for treatment as well. And there's several studies at BIOS Clinical Research here in town called Who Marcos and her group. So they're doing at least 2 studies that I know of, and possibly more. That's one of the next frontiers of treatment. So it's one of those things where treatment may kind of lead into a cure at some point as we get closer and closer. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead. Can we get the mic?
Thank you. So with younger people, largely, being on PrEP and things like that, how are you guys finding ways to communicate the significance of ending HIV to younger audiences?
That's probably a good question.
I think so, yes.
I mean, that's not happening in the context of cure research so much, although there are a lot of young people who are born with HIV who are now in the 30s and 40s who are experiencing a lot of the same things older folks are in terms of comorbidities and early cancers, increased risk of cancers and things like that. So we're trying to make sure that they get incorporated into cure research, and it's not just old folks, but people with old immune systems, I guess is the better way to do it. But you're right, there's a whole other frontier kind of outside cure research in terms of getting the word for PrEP out there. We've been hearing about recently a new injectable drug called lenacapavir, which has now been approved. It's called Yeztugo. And so that's been called, and it annoys the bejesus out of me when they do this, but they're calling it a vaccine. It's really not. But it's a 1 shot every 6 months treatment. So it's the same medication that some of us take, to treat our HIV is being used, just like Truvada and Descovy are to prevent it. So there's a lot of hope, especially in places like Africa, now that we've kind of completely destroyed their infrastructure for delivering HIV care with the end of USAID, where that may be a more workable option because people don't have to go to the clinic every month. It's once every 6 months. So there's a lot of hope out there, but there's so much that needs to be done. PrEP was not rolled out right in this country. It did not get to the populations that need it the most. We could talk all day about the problems with our healthcare system and delivery and society in general that lead to that. But there's a lot of work to be done, and I encourage people to be active. And the best thing we can do is be politically active and vote, because these decisions, and Paul have testified to Congress several times, and are doing it again next week.
Yeah, is it Wednesday or Thursday?
Thursday.
Thursday, okay, yeah.
So we all need to be activists in this time.
Thank you.
Yeah. So again, we'd like to thank our panelists so much for sharing everything today. This has been terrific. We do this every year, and we always learn more. Of course, things are always happening, so we really appreciate you coming out and sharing this with us today. So thank you so much. We've got David Gray from the LGBT Historical Society here, who's going to be doing a presentation, or the certificate, I guess, of knowledge. So take it away. Thank you, David.
Hi. Is this on?
Yes.
Okay. I can't quite tell. But anyway, hi, my name's David Gray, and I'm one of the co-founders and co-directors of the LGBT History and Archives of the Desert. And we're a fairly new organization, but our role and purpose is basically to document and record and protect and preserve the LGBT history of the desert. And I'd love to see all the panels that are here. And we actually made a panel, it's over there hanging. And our panel obviously has on it some of the news articles that were prominent when AIDS first came and presented itself in the Palm Springs area. But one of the things that we like to do is to recognize organizations and events and sort of historic things that have happened here in the desert. And with history, we kind of like to start with at least 10 years of history under people's belts. So we wanted to congratulate the HIV and Aging Research Project on their 10th anniversary. And so if Jeff, you want to come down, and whoever else. So I'm not going to tell you a lot about your organization, since you should know all about it, and if you don't, Jeff will tell you, I'm sure. But we did want to make sure that you are recognized for being here for 10 years and serving the community with all the kinds of scientific and important health information that you do provide. And so the Archives and the History Project wanted to recognize you for that. Do I know my top from my bottom? I don't know. Oh, that was a bad joke. Anyway, so it's congratulations on your 10th anniversary. This certificate is presented to HARP, HIV plus Aging Research Project Palm Springs, today on Tuesday. It says today, I can't read this. Today, November the 30th, 2025, the LGBT History and Archives of the Desert acknowledges this significant anniversary and contribution to our community. So thank you very much.
So thank you so much, David. We really appreciate this. And I thank you to everyone for supporting us for all these years. We've started by community, and so we appreciate all your support. So without further ado, we're going to have a reception coming up right now. Step outside, and got a slide for that. There you go. So for the next hour, please check out the quilt panels that are here. We've mentioned them. And a special thank you to Jennifer Morton from POS Magazine, because she made the panel for Dr. Steve Scheibel. So his panel is on the left-hand side there on the floor, in the full-size panel, so please check it out. We're really thrilled to have that. And then they have a table outside as well. And then we have our table, our own materials on there. If you haven't gotten one of our beautiful water bottles, please do. We have lots and lots, and I don't want to have to carry them home. And then please enjoy the reception out in the lobby. Please note that food and drink are not allowed back in the auditorium, so please enjoy it responsibly outside, and we'll reconvene at noon for the next part of our program of visual aids. But thank you.
Stage. First is Jennifer Morton, who is our moderator today. Jennifer is the managing editor of Smart and Strong, which publishes POS Magazine. You'll see outside. Cancer Health and other health-related websites. She previously worked as a managing editor for several publications, including Reels Content, Table World, and Gear. Jennifer previously served on our board for HIV and AIDS Research Project, and she also served as the board vice president for visual aids. Of the Palm Canyon Neighborhood Organization in Palm Springs, if you happen to live in that neighborhood. Next is Carl George. I'd like to welcome to the stage. Carl is an artist working primarily in experimental film and collage. He is a founding member of the New York-based art collective Allied Productions and has curated exhibitions in venues such as the Arm & Hammer Museum, the Film Society of Lincoln Center, the New York Department of Cultural Affairs, Participant Inc., McKinsey Institute, Warner Brothers, Paramount Studios, and Cineplex Studios in Rome. He also worked with visual aids and was previously produced and directed. Did you write it also? Produced, directed, and wrote one of the videos for visual aids?
Yes, in the previous year. Yeah.
And then last, I'd like to welcome James Barry. Dr. James Barry is a psychologist and licensed advanced alcohol drug counselor at LADC, privately practicing psychotherapy and substance abuse counseling here in Coachella Valley. He has formally been associated with both the Ford Center and DAP Health and has worked at the intersection of HIV and substance use. So welcome.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's panel about the Visual AIDS program, Meet Us Where We're At. Today's conversation, I really want it to be a conversation, not just a dialogue between the three of us on the stage. I'm hoping you will all be engaged and ask some questions as we go along. But really, it's an opportunity to discuss what we just witnessed, to reflect on the intersections of harm reduction and HIV, and to explore how art can challenge stigma, shift our understanding, and really spark conversations about meaningful change. So I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful for our panelists. So let's start. One thing I wanted to start with, I found this statistic that I thought was interesting. According to results from SAMHSA's 2024 National Survey on Drug Use and Health, among people aged 12 and older in 2024, 58.3% used tobacco, vape nicotine, used alcohol, or used an illicit drug in the past month. So more than half of our population are using substances. And I think it's really important that we learn how to talk about substance use. I found one of the I think it was the first film, talked about how some are accepted and some aren't, others aren't accepted in our society, and why is that? I mean, these are all things that we can unpack and talk about. But what I really want to start talking about is why it's so important to center the experiences of people who use drugs in the films, and how that can provide more nuanced and a compassionate response to the conversations about harm reduction and HIV. And how does that compare with how people talk about it in the world at large, on media, news, and whatnot? So, Carl, do you want to kind of talk about that a little bit first?
Well, first I'd say that we have to give props to visual aids for reaching out to artists, filmmakers, and finding these incredible works from Germany, Vietnam, Brazil, Chile, Nigeria. Puerto Rico, and Nigeria. Yeah, kind of incredible. So we're hearing first-person narratives, which is the most important thing, really. I found it was really, many things are interesting in this 5 or 6 films we just watched, but mostly that the idea of harm reduction was a revelation to many of the users in the film as well. I mean, to go from, what was it, 5 milligrams 25 times a day to 2 milligrams 25 times a day was something that the user in the film didn't even realize meant harm reduction, as was the case with Jose Luis Cortez in Puerto Rico. So, it takes many forms, and it can be effective not only in our understanding of addiction, but in very real terms, in terms of saving someone's life from overdose.
Right. And you want to add anything to that and talk about?
I would just say am I on here?
Yeah.
To Carl's point too, I think there are a lot of folks, appeared as they were being interviewed that weren't even aware of the implications of taking drugs. I mean, it's party time, let's have some fun, and this is gonna, I'm out at the bar, this is gonna last, or, you know, at the parade, or what it might be, and then it's all over with. And for some people it is, but for the majority of people, it's something that really grabs a hold. If you've had a good time and chocolate ice cream tastes good, you want to eat it again, don't you? I mean, that's the thing that your brain remembers, and it's a very difficult thing to walk away from if that's something that you had an enjoyable experience with. I mean, let's face it. The other piece I wanted to say, that the one that really got me was compassion.
Yes.
That compound word, it's so true. And I hope I'm not jumping ahead, but a lot of the clients that I work with, many of the clients I should say, are young men, older men in our local community here who are using methamphetamine. And they're using it just on the weekend, just every other weekend, just once a month. And that quickly turns into something like chocolate ice cream. You know, it's awfully good. You know, I know it's only Tuesday and I don't usually use till Friday, but okay, I'll wait till Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I think I've just seen it destroy so many people's lives. And not only that, but the thing is, this isn't a substance that you're buying that you know that somebody is developing, you know, in a pharmaceutical lab. You really don't know what it is. And quite frankly, there's several different recipes for methamphetamine to use different things in there. The reason I stick on this is because I think it also has led a lot of people to be infected with HIV, sometimes by choice. And that to me is kind of a frightening. There's so much more antecedent that comes before people use drugs that hopefully we'll get to that in a minute, but I don't want to.
Well, no, that's a kind of a good segue, because then the fifth film, I mean, I think there's this like, why do we have a drug problem? Why are there so many drugs in our neighborhood? Why are there so many drugs in our community? But it's like, why don't we shift that narrative and say, why is there so much pain? Why do we have so much pain in our communities that people need to find this need to escape, or, you know, whatever it is, you know, if they want, whatever, why they want to do it. But why is there so much pain in our community? And what can we do to help that? And how does harm reduction play a role in that? Either one of you can jump in.
Well, I think the pain factors are pretty well known in our community. They go to childhood trauma, abuse, the church, churches, religion. They go to, you know, family, being ostracized by your family, your parents, school, everything that we put up with when we realize or don't even realize as young kids that we are different from the rest of the classroom, and or at least 95%. There's always a few others in there. And that's when the pain starts, you know, and then the rest of your life is either managing that all through your teenage years, either you're managing the pain or you're trying to figure out where it comes from and why, you know. Armistead Maupin said we have our biological families and our logical families. And so when we finally figure out who our logical family is, and we realize, you know, that we have a community, the healing can begin. And that's when you become a full person and you start to heal. Along that way comes alcohol, drugs, sex addiction, all kinds of things, and it's very easy, as anyone in here knows, it's very easy, and you maybe can speak on this, to slip into addiction, even inadvertently, you know. So, yes, let's talk about the pain. I think that's the most important conversation. Never mind the addiction and the mess that it creates. Go to the root cause.
Again, I think to Carl's point, a lot of times when people come to see me, they'll be so, first of all, there's a lot of stigma around therapy, period. I think that the one thing that COVID brought to us as a community was the idea that I can't do this by myself, this is really hard. And when people started to come out and talk about, I need to talk about, you know, what it's like to watch television all day long and not be able to go out and, you know, that kind of stuff, isolation. I think that's the main thing, is maybe to reframe addiction or substance dependence. It's only a symptom of something else. quite frankly. And when people come to sit down, one of the first things I tell them that they think they're the wrong person's office is I say, you know, good for you for using drugs. What? And I said, you made a choice to use something that helped you through something that was very difficult. What you didn't realize at the time was it has now become the primary issue. And so there's no really in-between area, but to not shame them for the idea that they reached out and tried to do something to benefit themselves, maybe not knowing where this was going to go. On the other hand, you know, some people I think use drugs because they're self-destructive and they want to not feel good about themselves. I mean, to everybody's point, it's the antecedents, it's what drives the car here, you know, and that's the most important thing. So I think when people come to therapy, particularly for substance abuse treatment, if they're ashamed, if they feel like they're a bad person, I mean, that's not a very good motivator. Really, the motivator is that someone cares about you, that you can learn to care about yourself in a different way, and that perhaps this is just an interim thing, you know? However, if it is an interim thing or it's not, once you decide that you want to be sober or not use these whatever substances there might be, that becomes that's the next mission, that's the next goal. It doesn't happen overnight, and you have to constantly water that plant, you know, and keep it healthy. So.
Yeah, I think one of the lines that stuck out to me, this was in the Voices of Resilience, it's not about drugs or HIV, it's about dignity, it's about building a system that says we matter. And I think along those lines, what you guys are just talking about, it's like the program of using harm reduction and not just talking about abstinence or moralizing, like you're doing drugs, you're bad. It's like, but how can we talk and have these discussions that really show compassion and show, you know, your heart about what people are going through and needing, and like to the title of the series, meeting people where they're at, and maybe they're not ready to give up the, you know, whatever they're using, or maybe they want to just do it less, and how can we help them and support them in whatever they choose to do in their path of healing, right? Yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to add about any of that? Or
a line that kind of stuck out, and I forget which film it was in, I think the last one, where he's actually talking to his therapist, who they both end up naked, which but his therapist, would you lose your license if you
Oh no, that's right, absolutely fine.
Yeah, that's fine. By the way, the last film they've made several films, this couple, the two directors, and apparently they're really brilliant. I haven't had a chance to look at any others. But the whole thing with the laser light, you may be wondering, they were pantomiming drug use and the smoking of the he's got the torch going, there's no pipe. It was a pantomime, because I was like, what the fuck are they doing? I mean, what new thing with the laser thing? So, anyway, but the ongoing drug use that they're all experiencing is real, and he's talking from his heart at the end. But one question that one of them, I think, in that film brought up was, is it real? Is, you know, when we're doing all of this, when we're having these orgies, these days-long orgies, and I come out of it at the end, and I feel horrible, and I say I'm never going to do it again, and then I do it again a day later, the chocolate ice cream analogy. But is it real? And I remember myself talking to my therapist and saying, but I did all of that, but was it real? When I was saying that, I meant, was it genuine? I knew it was real, it really happened. I was there, it happened, it was real. But was it genuine as a human experience? You know, did I really feel pleasure, or was I just imagining I was feeling pleasure, aided and abetted by drug use, you know, by extreme drug use? The therapist was not able to answer me, because I guess it's a question that can't really be answered. He said, yes, it was real, in real chronological time and place. You were there, it happened. Was it genuine? Only you can determine that. So I found that whole kind of questioning really interesting.
If I might, there was a comment, I think it was in the fourth or fifth I mean, it might have been the last film, where he alluded to the idea that I'm isolating with others that are doing the same thing. I was taking notes because you covered really good points for taking there. Isolating with others doing the same thing. Even to Carl's point, maybe it wasn't real. Maybe it was real. Maybe it was, but it was certainly real between what was happening in a physical time and space.
Yeah.
You know, the other part that I saw that I think was in the one about the park, and this talks about leading up to substance use. We're like ghosts. Ghosts live where there is unfinished business.
Right.
Well, that touches my heart big time. Because that, you know, I see, excuse me, but I see a lot of ghosts walk into my office. And they're a fraction of who they were at one point, you know. And occasionally on a good day, you see them walk out, you know. And thank you, appreciate it. On a good day, you see them walk out. And after looking at what's behind the scenes, you know.
And are they less ghost-like?
And they're not left ghost-like, they're renewed, you know, they have some quality, some self-esteem, some substance. One of the things I think is important to remember is that you are worthy by virtue of your existence, period.
Amen.
You know, and I try and tell people that all the time, you know, but the other thing I was gonna add, and excuse my emotion there for a minute, that there's a symbiotic relationship between substance use and drugs, or substance use and sex, excuse me.
Right.
And that's one of the hardest things, I think, when people come in and they say, I don't want to do this anymore, but I don't know who I am if I don't do methamphetamine or if I don't drink alcohol. It gives me the permission and the wherewithal to be that person. And on another note, I mean, a little deeper, for kinksters, people that are in kink play and stuff like that, they come in and we'll talk about that. Let's talk about this openly. What are your preferences? And what do you like to do? How would it be for you to let yourself engage in some of this with a consenting adults, or group of adults, whatever your interest is, without being on substances? Would that be okay? And the idea for a lot of people that play like that is like, I can't even imagine how we're going to fear who. I don't know who I am unless I do so much substance, you know, whatever it might be. So anyway, I just wanted to add that too. That makes it very difficult, and I think the other thing that Jennifer was talking about, a sense of community in terms of helping to stay sober or to find another way. The community can also work the other way in terms of younger people coming out, or people that aren't sure about themselves and they go, oh, maybe I can be part of the club. Or, you know, if I use some meth, okay, I'll do that. Or if I drink more and get giddy at the bar, you know, something like that. So it kind of works both ways.
Right. And I think that word plugs into what you're saying, Carl, is like people may not have planned, but it's so easy sometimes to fall into these things where it just kind of becomes too much because you just want to have fun with your friends, and then all of a sudden you're doing things that are really, you know, harming you and maybe some other people.
There is absolutely a community aspect to it as well. I mean, there's a group of everyone doing it, and you're all having sex, and it's hot, and it's, you know, there's a community aspect to it. I think in learning, like if you go to university to become a teacher, they teach you about this thing called the affective filter, which if you tried to learn a language, for example, the affective filter goes up, and you can only hear and see white. You just cannot accept information, you know. The affective filter is up, so a good teacher will attempt to drop the affective filter so information can get through. And I think, why did I bring that up? Because the affective filter, I think, is up with is up without the drugs, and it's dropped with the drugs. So you're able to do all of these things that you, let's say, naturally would be inhibited. You'd have huge inhibitions. That's the affective filter. It's up, the inhibitions. Those drop, and it allows you to become something that you perceive to be the real you, or that you would like to be. And so in a way, that's very liberating. You feel a great feeling of liberation. You feel great sexual prowess, where you maybe were timid or shy without the drugs. It gives you all of these kind of Are they false? Goes back to my whole idea of, is it real? And maybe the question is more, is it genuine? I don't know.
Good points. I was just thinking, does anyone want to jump in from the audience? Because I'd love to hear some thoughts and perspectives before we keep going.
Question?
Let's go do Nicholas, right? Stephen, Nicholas.
Stephen?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
sorry. That's right.
That's okay, that's all right.
There's time for everybody.
Thank you so much for your important work. I knew I wanted to be here today, so I didn't really pay attention to the information that was provided about this aspect of the day's program, and I was surprised pleasantly that it was about this very important issue. But it left me wondering, Jennifer, how did visual aids as an organization and a movement identify this particular need for messaging and go about and curate this body of work? And was this body of work specifically curated by local people for today's program, or does this exist as a block that visual aids is putting out because of the shared subject matter across content?
So, I don't know how many years how many years have been doing this film program? Day Without Art started in 1988, and again, it was to kind of showcase the fact that a lot of artists were dying of AIDS and archive their work, but then at some point it evolved. And originally they were going to museums and they were asking them to cover up art, and that's what came to Day Without Art, to actually visually show that these people were being silenced. And then at some point they began doing these film programs, and each year they do a different theme. And so this year it was centered around the intersection of HIV and harm reduction. In the past, it's been about advocacy or things. So they've done each year is a different theme. And so this one, it was curated by a group of people.
Led by Blake.
Led by the program director of Visual Aids. And they had people submit different bodies of work, that basically pitched these films to them, and then they had collectively decided which ones to fund and submit.
So they give $5,000, maybe it's gone up a bit, to each of the filmmakers.
Yes.
Which for an artist filmmaker is, a good amount of money. So they were able to make these very simple 5-minute long films. And this program is being projected or shown today and tomorrow at over 150 museums around the world.
Around the world, yeah.
Yeah. So
One of the things I just want to commend to anyone involved in the projects is the fact that these projects exist at the level of depth and honesty. It's just really kind of profound when you look at all the obstacles that we're facing as a community and individuals with these issues are facing.
I mean, Visual Aids is really, I think, tapped into what people are going through, living with HIV and the experiences. And I think, again, art has this way of really, sparking these conversations that may not happen. You can use different ways, whether it's a different medium, whether it's film, whether it's a portrait, a sculpture. There's a woman who was an exhibit up at the Bronx Museum, this woman, Joyce McDonald, who basically learned how to, she always had an artistic background, but she began to use clay and sculpt and was really able to work a lot of her personal trauma and using the clay to tell a story, And so I think art has such that transformative way of moving people and engaging people. So I'm glad that you reacted so well because I just think it sparks conversations. It really does. It just opens your eyes to different ways of looking at things, that perception of,
it's interesting, as I said in the beginning, that they are able to reach out and get this global first-person perspective, because I think it kind of shows Americans and North Americans who have an abundance of everything. We have everything at our disposal. And then you see what they are putting up with or dealing with in Nigeria, in Lagos, or in Puerto Rico or Brazil, where they don't have everything, and it boils down to the same root issues, period. Getting clean needles, a safe space where you won't be arrested or harassed, with a nurse standing there in case you overdose. Very simple little recipe, at least to begin the harm reduction, which many times, I would not say in the majority of cases, but many times will lead to sobriety. Sometimes it just takes a little thing. But the abundance and wealth and the availability of things almost has nothing to do with it. It's more an example of our ultra-consumerism than it is about anything else, really. It boils down to the same issues and the same problems.
Yeah, I mean, how we address them can be different in each situation, but yeah, there's some very universal themes that come across here. Stephen, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I want to direct this book at James and Carl. James is a long-time therapist here, and Carl is a fairly recent transplant to the desert. 2 years. What do you think about, there is a definite increase in usage here in the desert for people older than 55 to 60, essentially our people aging with HIV. What do you think? I know there was a lot that was going on because of COVID and people lack of socialization, and then finally, oh my God, everything's open now and whatever. But what do you feel in particular in our community is leading to those increases in usage, increase in infections in older people?
I'll take that initially. I think, you mentioned 55 and over, so we're talking about retirees potentially, or people that are semi-retired maybe, and finding a lot more time on their hands. So again, it goes back to isolation, I think. It's, there are choices I think you can make when you're, 60, 70, whatever. You can stay home and be safe, so to speak, and watch, television shows and do whatever hobbies you have. Maybe you have a group of friends that you hang with. But I think for a lot of people, they don't know what to do. I mean, in the social aspect of it, they don't have a social life. To the point of drugs and alcohol, maybe the social life becomes alcohol. And that's one thing that I think is really interesting, that we always sort of say drugs and alcohol. Well, alcohol is the number one used drug in the world. I mean, that and pretty close with nicotine, I would say, although maybe we're not seeing, I think there's a decline in that, although there's sort of a rise, I think, with the younger generation now with the vapes and stuff. So didn't they read the studies? Hello? It's not good for you.
But now they taste good.
Yeah, but
they're cherry flavored.
And it looks cool, right? And big things, but yeah, to your point, I think it's again about isolation, and just to tag on to that, the last film, which it talked about, the gentleman was talking about, he said, I just want to make other people happy. I always want to make other people happy. This, I think, is indicative of a lot of gay folks who grow up thinking, if I can just have this persona where no one finds out, and I can just, particularly for older people, because, like somebody my age, if I would have come out when I was in junior high school, I would have had my ass kicked, basically. Because I saw it happen to other people, right? So you're kind of like, oh, let me try it. I think that's part of the pressure, and I think even some people that are older and maybe baby boomer generation have worked through that, but some people haven't. And I think to the point of the guy that's in the film, that in itself is an antecedent to want to use substances. To only want to think about other people and make them happy. And then all of a sudden, he finds out that this is really not working for him. What about me? And anyway, I think I'm going to be rambling, but that's kind of the point I'm making.
Yeah, I think it's that loneliness or that feeling that you want to have the companionship, and if that's how you can get it, then that's sometimes the way the route that is taken. Yeah.
I think also that a lot of us, depending on when we came out and how old we were and stuff like that, we were, as particularly gay men, we were essentially socialized in the bars. Mm-hmm. We weren't socialized like, let's join our bowling team.
Well, that was a safe space in a way, right?
Yeah, it was a safe space,
yeah.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's complicated, I think, because what we know of, Jennifer and I were talking before when the films came on, we were talking about like, 12-step programs, which have saved the lives of so many people. And there would be no way in the world that I would say anything negative about them. However, they're not for everyone. And that is a matter of, I think it's, people misread that it's a religious program. It absolutely is not. It kind of beckons you to have faith in something bigger than yourself, to try and save yourself. It's part of it anyway. But I think that's the thing, is that people, either the switch is on or the switch is off. You're sober or you're not. And people understand the difficulty in coming off of something that's so, let's use the word habit forming, say heroin or even alcohol. It's not only the substance and the physiological aspects of using a substance, it's also what we call sort of the ritual, and I'll tell you a very quick story about a woman that I worked with who was around alcohol, and she said, I just cannot imagine myself not pouring that beautiful crystal glass that I have with this much wine, all in her head, and sitting in front of the mirror, looking at myself and saying like, you look beautiful, aren't you sophisticated with this glass of wine you're drinking? Right. My point. Also I think the rituals of people that smoke methamphetamine or use IV drugs, that's something else, it's another kind of ritual. That's the thing to overcome too. It's not just the socialization of it, working with other people and aren't we cool? So I don't know, I think that's the problem, is that we don't see harm reduction as an alternate space. And what does that look like? We only use once a week instead of every day, or what does that look like? But I think the methadone programs have been really pretty helpful for people, from what I can tell.
And I think so many times, like our society, we just want that quick fix, not literally, but like the quick solution to these problems. And it's not, it's like you said, it's an ongoing, it's a struggle. I mean, everyone's struggling every day, and it's a constant reminder and constant things that we have to do to, help each other, and not just, oh, we're going to take care of that, it's going to be all done, and that's it. We're not going to think about it again. No, it's a constant evolving.
And just one other thing to your point, like you say, we want things fast. So fast food,
Yeah.
Right.
Drive through, you're starving, you're hungry, you eat it, I feel great now, I'm full. And an hour later, you're hungry again. Because there's no substance to it, But the thing is, that's what we need to look at in terms, I think, of sobriety too. So if you can do something that you can consistently have a positive outcome and not go like a roller coaster ride. And the other thing I think too about people, I just wanted to say before I forget, is I always remind people that are using substances that it's a very simple principle, a very simple law. What goes up must come down. What goes down eventually comes up. So depending on your drug's of choice, it's just the way it is. So if you're willing to take the downside of whatever you're using for the upside, and you can do that over and over again, I know I can. So, anyway.
The trans woman saying that she realized she had reached a kind of a critical point when she didn't feel balanced. She knew that she was no longer balanced. I thought first was very, maybe more Asian-inspired philosophical thinking around it, but it's true, her chi was off. Wasn't her name Chi?
Yes.
Yeah.
But her chi was off. She wasn't balanced, and all of a sudden she said, "Okay, I've got to stop this. It's not right. It's affecting me the wrong way," and that's what did it for her. So, harm reduction is almost it's like addiction, self-described, and sobriety as well. It's self-analyzed. What am I saying? Nothing. But
Saying a lot. Yeah.
I'm just saying that there are, I think, the long-term thinking around sobriety and harm reduction is the way. It's the only way, really. There is no quick fix.
Right. Well, that was in the film. What was it? The Ghost in the Park. It was great that they were able to bring in the bands that were able to do the harm reduction, but they were only there Monday through Friday. 95. So what happened? So it's again, it's like, well, we can do it, but we can't do it all the time. But we have to do it all the time because there's such a need, for this continual support. Anyone else want to jump in? Yeah. I'll go Jeff and then. Yeah.
We were talking about isolation, and I think one thing that's unique here at Palm Springs is almost all of us are transplants, right? People made a decision or forced into a decision. I mean, a lot of it's forced these days with the housing costs. Can people hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Housing cost crisis in the coastal cities and now here. And so people were uprooted from their communities that sustained them. They lived through the horrors of the early AIDS pandemic. And because they had communities that supported them, now they moved here and they're not connected. And there's lots here. Those of us who live here, we all know it. We all participate or create things to provide that. But people don't always access those. So I'm just wondering kind of to what extent that plays into it. And then, COVID, of course, I think really highlighted that for a lot of people. And now people are being forced out of Palm Springs because they can't afford it. They're ending up in Yucca Valley, which is a drug nest of amazing proportions if you spend any time up there. So, people are just really kind of at a loss, I think.
Isn't that where they film Breaking Bad? I mean,
Sure looks like it, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, there are resources, and I can't remember which film it was, but they didn't know about them, or they didn't know what existed. And everything that HARP does every month, you do a different program, you do different, panels. So there's a lot of things out there that can support people, but again, it's like, how do we connect people who may not be aware of them? How can we remind them of these things? How can we all as individuals, help bring these things to light so that more people are aware of the resources that are available?
The next one is there, and then
Yeah.
Don Garrison, happy to be here today. Thanks so much for the film program. I thought that was amazing. I'm a drug addict that's in sobriety. I'm also a treasurer of Warm Sands Neighborhood Organization. I had lunch with George. Dr. Berry was my therapist at DAP, and I haven't had a therapist since you because you were the best one. But,
did you repause? Yes.
But I found sobriety 3 years and 8 months tomorrow. And, I recognized a lot of the things that were happening in all the films. Like I noticed the pipe was missing and people holding their arm over their hands and the laser. I was like, what's the, oh, that's what the laser is. And I just thought it was a great topic to combine with HIV because we know that it's spread that way. Or when I found out I was HIV positive, I started using drugs because they told me I had 6 months to live. I'd never done drugs. And then when I did live, then I was addicted to drugs. So it was interesting to see all the similarities between all the different countries. The little Nigerian lady that was a little powerhouse activist that changed the laws for the entire country, apparently, which is amazing. And I know in Brazil the president was crazy, and our current president's first term, he actually flew the president out. I don't know, they don't know where he is, but it was just interesting to see all the I love yous when you're on GHB and all that stuff. And I was looking in the last film because I thought that last monologue with his therapist before they got naked just was so honest. Like he almost breaks into crying and all that stuff, but it was an actor. And just a great film. I love film, and I thought these films should be in the short film fest that we have every year, or be submitted to the short film fest around the world, because they usually put them in segments, and it would be a great segment to see these and the ones from the past, and they put them in like an hour-and-a-half blocks, so that would be some good films.
Yeah. But what they program that might be something to talk about.
Yeah. And good filmmaking, and so glad this was part of it today. So that was my comment.
Well,
I didn't have any questions.
That's great.
I would encourage everyone to go to visualaids.org and please leave a comment.
All right. Thank you.
Because they work hard on this stuff. And they have a staff of 4 people, and
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they do this and many, many other programs throughout the year, as well as housing an archive of hundreds of artists' work who have died or are living with HIV, including Keith Haring, Felix Gonzalez Torres, really, you know, famous, well-known artists, and people who are not so famous and well-known, but whose work would have been lost, you know, thrown in the trash when they emptied the apartments. And so it's worth going to the website, look through the artist registry. It's amazing, amazing.
And
You
these,
leave a comment.
yeah, and these films are available. You can share the link with anybody else, so they'll be up after the World AIDS Day. If
Yeah.
they're archived, and you can watch them at any time.
As of tomorrow, they'll be at the Whitney Museum, the Los Angeles, big museums all over the world, and other venues like this, all in one day. So I had a film 3 or 4 years ago. They're all about 5 minutes long. My film was called The Lie, and I don't remember the theme of the screenings that year, but mine was about holding the government to account. So it must have had something to do with that. That's what I made the film about.
Thank you, Carl.
I believe this gentleman.
Yes.
Yes.
My apologies, first of all, I was outside having a lunch and enjoyed the weather while I was eating because I was hungry. But my friend Tim, he saw me out there, came out here and joined me. We were catching up, and I lost track of time. And then when I came in, over to the restaurant, I saw that from the start, what I wanted to see today was the second half. I enjoyed the first half of the sessions. But anyway, I was looking more towards the video films, so the biographies. So you had anything to do with the first ones? I saw the last two. But about the last two, the thing that struck me most, I want to talk about was the, I think this is Puerto Rico or Brazil, I'm not sure, I think it's Brazil.
Puerto Rico. The last two was Puerto Rico and Brazil.
Female psychiatrist and
Yeah, Jose Luis Cortez.
yeah,
Puerto
I
Rico.
understand that part, but anyway, it's all beautiful because first I was a little bit came in here out of context, and I came back to my seat, right, my sweater, and somebody sitting right here next to it is one of the speakers from earlier. It was over there on a panel, and so I sat here, I sat down, I started watching, and the first one, the guy put himself on himself and full of exposure. The next one started, and I got squeamish in there a little bit, just because it's hard for me to watch. Because when I moved here in 2007, new to Palm Springs from Texas, not single, I got involved with a lot of the stuff going on here. The city is just central, especially with the gay side. The thing was that everywhere I went, people were doing meth and stuff. And there were a few times where we had a private party or a resort or a big event. There have been a few occasions where I got involved in that, and even though I've been in sobriety for 13 years before that, it changed my life. I didn't lose anything for that, but anyway, I slipped into it because of the heat of the moment kind of thing, just trying to fit in, find my way around here. What I was shocked about, some places I go to, way up in Rancho Mirage or Palm Desert, these gated communities, multi-vendor homes, some wealthy guy there, it's a vast house. You have all these young guys in there. He have tables full of all the drugs there, and they were the artists that had all this wealth. They were up there in their late 70s, up there smoking crack and everything, or meth. And so, but I veered away from where I lived, because everywhere I lived here, these few places I've had dealers living right next door to me, 24-hour traffic, and lots of fights, police out all the time, and people overdosing, and they crash for 3 or 4 days, and they come out. I watched them deteriorate, period of years. People I knew, they were just using it casually. It got worse and worse. And
How is your life now?
Oh, that's fine, but I made me squeamish with watching that. It's not really part of my past I wasn't not proud of, but I know it's so expensive here. When I moved here in 2007, they had banners everywhere, DEP and all the resorts here, violence, that there's a major epidemic of syphilis and crystal meth use in Palm Springs. And now, 18 years later, I'm still here.
Right. The work doesn't end.
And it's still, the syphilis is not as big as that. Meth is just as big as ever. They have all these wonderful services, the Pride Center, DAP, rehab, and what do you call it? You're talking about, it's like a compassionate intervention, not intervention, but
For the harm reduction?
Harm reduction,
Yeah.
yeah.
Those are all good programs. But what I learned in AA and NA myself after 13 years and chairing thousands of meetings, coast to coast and going to big conferences, and learning a lot from experience. I know that, and working with a lot of sponsored people for halfway houses, I've got them on their way. But every time I'm sharing and someone comes from a halfway house with their opinion about the law, they're forced to go to like 12-step meetings, they have an option. They have to go on a shuttle with their guard. before the meeting starts, I have to sign them in, sign their forms, bring it what time they got there. When the meeting's over, I have to sign their forms again, to be there the whole time, so they're taking back some street supervision. Thing is, I sponsor some of the halfway houses, but when I heard that when they would share at these meetings, they've been like their fifth or sixth time in a rehab house. They started a 12-step program, they gave me a sponsor, they dropped out. And what I learned, what was so beautiful about the last spell there, where everybody's talking there, he's coming, I realized the guy's, he's experiencing his experiential bottom. And you cannot, nobody can succeed in a 12-step program until they hit their own bottom. And you can't force that. And so aggressive intervention would be a bad thing. You can't force somebody to get sober. You know? But the thing that's beautiful about it, his emotions started coming out, and that made me emotional. But also some beauty in that. And then he's expressing how he lost himself and his pleasure for life, and who he was, but he wanted more than that. I'm in a similar place right now, 17 years of age almost, where I'm tired of all this stuff I've been doing, even though I don't do that's the thing I can't tolerate anymore. The thing is, I'm so very sexually active, I'm ready to throw in the towel. Part of me thinking, I've had so much time in pause for the past 18 years, for 2 or 3 lifetimes, I've had more back. Maybe I should just get off of that and get myself recentered back to my center and get my balance back, putting all my energy in my spiritual side, which is important to me. So I'm going to train for myself. But to see it there, I thought it was very powerful, very beautiful, especially when he got emotional and I could see him tearing up.
Yeah,
realizing what he wanted, but where he's still stuck at.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, and I think that's to the point of the whole title. Meet us where we're at. Where are you? Are you ready to make a change in your life? Are you ready to heal? Because you deserve. I'm gonna maybe close on this, but I have someone I know recently went into recovery, and he's a gay man. He's living with HIV, and he said something to the effect, "Well, it was gonna happen. It was, it was my time." And I'm like, and I was just so sad to hear that because I felt like, well, it doesn't have to be your time. But I felt like there was something that. It was like this resignation, but it doesn't, And I told him as he was going into recovery, I'm like, you deserve to heal. You deserve to take care of yourself. You deserve all that's good for you. And if that's whatever that is, you deserve to have that. And I think that's where it comes to this place of having compassion when we have these conversations with people, and not the judgment part of it, because it's so easy to be like, oh, they're bad, they're doing drugs. But no, they're human beings who are in pain, and why are they in pain, and how can we help them, and how can we support them? So that's what I kind of want to close. Do you want some closing thoughts? Or?
I would just say life is difficult for anybody. I mean, especially in the times we've seen in the last few years. But just to reiterate, I would also say that, I asked somebody recently, is it easier to come out as a gay man, transgender, or whatever, in this day and age than it was in the 80s or 70s when I came out? Because I still remember my mom saying to me, it's not that you're gay. I don't have an issue with that at all. That's all fine. I just think you're going to have a tough life because of the way society is. So that, fast forwarding here, I think the issue is still that we have problems with everything we face, gay or straight or not, or whatever it might be. And I think it's double down a little bit in the LGBT community because we try and hide that. So we become very good at hiding that to try to survive, and then we can also become very good at hiding substance abuse. They parallel each other, and it becomes very challenging for people who don't know who they are. And a lot of us don't. We're all on a search and a journey for that as it is anyway. So I think drugs can really kind of muck that up quite a bit.
I'll just finish from my point of view by saying that these are nothing new. Drugs have always been a big part of gay life and the gay community and society as a whole. And, I'm 67, so I remember really coming out. I've been gay since I came out with my mother, but really coming out and finding my family and my den mother, as we used to call him. Her name was Larry. We called her Zilla. And there was a whole family of us, all of whom are dead, every single one. But in the 70s, we were on the cusp of something great, the gay community. We really were. We were on the cusp. Yeah.
It's hard. I think and I think no matter when you're coming out, if it was 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 10 years ago, it's still a struggle. no matter, it's coming to identity in terms of who you are, what you want to be, what kind of person you want to be. And, again, gay, straight, whatever, it's hard. and then it doesn't get easier, as we get older, we're dealing with other things and other issues, or, you might be retired and not have much to do, but then you're like, what do I do? Life is a struggle. And it's like, how can we come together and support one another with compassion and love and care, and whatever journey someone may be on, how can we support them in the best way that we can? Do you want to add something, Stephen?
No, I just wanted to thank all of you, and thank you very much for being here. You're welcome. Something really fantastic. Amazing. I think what happens is we talk about almost an open and essentially chosen families, and I think what's happened not just not just with the gay community. It's a very particular thing, because not only do we have our chosen family, but through the decades, and especially with what has happened, we have had many chosen families. We've had our initial chosen family, then we lost our family through the AIDS crisis, and then we found another family, and then we lost many of them through COVID, and now we found our families again. So the one thing that these films show, and even last year's and the other ones, is that we're renewable. There's always something to look forward to, and basically history is cyclical. Our politics are cyclical. And it'll renew again. It may be 3 steps backwards and 2 steps forward, but we're renewable and cyclical. And I just want to thank you all for being here.
Thank you. And I just want to encourage you to keep having those conversations and keep having those, dialogues that need to spark these conversations and to enact change and to call your Congress people.
And thank you to all of you who stuck around.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
That's what I appreciate. Thank you.